incredible day of creation outside, and He's blessed us with this day, and we're excited to be together for worship today. Thank you. It's so good to see Bob and Hope Carter today. I would have a flowery, lofty introduction for them, but then, that'd be like introducing your favorite pair of shoes to you. It's so easy to beat them, and you've never heard an introduction where favorite shoes and you in the same sentence.
I just think of how favorite shoes tend to smell.
Well, then, so I'll rework my illustration. No, I mean, it's just so good to see them. And I know we've enjoyed a lot of time with them over the years, a lot of prayers, a lot of support. And I used to tell my friend Kiki Harris all the time when she was going to Australia, remember, when you go to Australia, I'm going with you. And every time she went, I went. And so every time you guys do the things you do, we're going with you. And we love you and appreciate you so much. Glad to have you here. Hope is going to be in charge, as she always is, and she's going to she's going to be sharing with us during this hour, and then Bob will be sharing during worship as well. And so welcome, and you can come and lead us.
I was told to stand up here. It seems kind of distant, but I'm going to stare at my screen so that I know what you're seeing. It is good to be here. Oh, I see why he wants me. There's a microphone. Let me get this up. Yeah, it's good to see you again. We love Nahunta and this beautiful sunshine. Thank you. Thank you. I like that, being in charge, Pastor Eric. I've never heard that one. But today, got to get my screen up, open. There we go. Okay, try this again. Huh?
You're hidden.
I'm hidden? Okay. You know what? I can do this. That's good. Is that better? Okay, good. Anyway, today we were trying to think, what should we tell you? Because you've heard us talk before. So we are going to tell you some of the things that you've heard before, but I think what we have realized is now that we're getting a little bit older and we are thinking, looking back at 38 years of ministry in Africa. So it's a long time to look back over. It's like, okay, why do we do what we do? And how do we convey that to you? So our passion has been to make the good news visible and bring hope and healing. That's been kind of our motto, bring hope and healing. But what does that look like? And I'm supposed to use this to advance the slide. Okay, here we go. So what that looks like is when you're sick, you have health. When you're hungry, you find food. When you're lonely and feeling isolated or marginalized, good news is a friend or community. And community in Africa is really, really important. What about when you're anxious and fearful? Good news is peace of mind. And what gives you peace of mind other than Jesus Christ? When you're struggling with low self-esteem and you feel like you have no value, good news is discovering that you have value and finding your purpose. And for all of us who are guilty as sinners, good news is the forgiveness of God. We love that passage in Matthew 25 where Jesus is saying, he's talking about in the kingdom. When you enter the kingdom, there are going to be some goats that you separate out on the left and some sheep on the right, and you want to be one of the sheep on the right. What makes the difference between being a goat or a sheep, being accepted and going into the kingdom, is if you've done it for the least of these, my brethren, you've done it for me. So that's kind of our motto, and I like this picture. It's our worship team, and a group of young 20-somethings who are going on and doing all of these things in their ministries as well. So good news for us. What is that like? And what does it mean? Oh, I got to remember I've got two devices here. I went too far. Okay. For Bob, he was developing a palliative care team. And he's told you about that before. He spent a lot of time, just in the middle of COVID, he was having to train up a new team. So he spent a lot of time working alongside them every day, doing trainings, bringing up healthcare professionals, nurses that understood palliative care. It's not the same as some other nurses, other kinds of nursing like pediatric or surgical. There's things that you need to know about end-of-life issues. And there were some, as a clinical officer that he trained, that's like a physician assistant, and he trained, and they was working with a team of chaplains and social workers, because when you deal with those kinds of issues, there's a lot of things that come up with end of life besides health, besides pain, being pain-free. And so that was important. But then in trying to figure out how he was going to make it sustainable, he had to figure out how to get the rest of the hospital on board. And so he worked with a vision for getting a more comprehensive cancer care center. And Kijabi Hospital has a very good surgical program, and they have a very good pathology department, one of the few mission hospitals that has a pathology where they could do the tissue diagnosis and tell that we had cancer. But when they were doing that before, they would have to just always refer this person off to the government hospital, where they may be seen sometime in the next 6 months. But if you've got cancer, you don't want to wait that long, and you need more care, you need compassionate care. So they were trying to think, how can we do something here at Kijabi? And so together with his team, they worked and prepared, and there now is a cancer care program going on at Kijabi Hospital where they're able to give some chemotherapy, and through some very wonderful donations that the Lord orchestrated himself, we got some equipment to do that. There's an oncologist that comes up a couple times a week from Nairobi to supervise and manage that, and we have enough medical care people we can do that. So that's good news if you are facing end-of-life issues. At Moffat, which is where most of our energies are, Moffat Bible College, and we've talked to you about this before, we have an AIDS Ministries program in which we're looking at how can we empower our students to serve the community better, to be aware of all those issues. And so a lot of activities go on through that, and we've told you a little bit more about some of these. We have these 4 core courses, which I think we've told you about: understanding HIV, just what is the role of the church when we think about good news. We're not talking about how to train these as medical people, but how can we help them share the good news as pastors. In Kenya, if somebody is sick or has some issue, who do they go to first? It's the pastor, not the clinic, not other people. It's the pastor. And then the pastor says, what do I do with this? This is not my area of training. So they say, yeah, there's things you can do. Let's see what you can do to help walk the journey. We've talked about the behavior change program, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that later, where we're teaching our students how to take a life skills curriculum to primary school students, grades 6, 7, and 8, which is about 12 to 15-year-olds. Very powerful program. Biblical Issues in HIV is the Applied Theology Department. We've named ourselves that, where we just talk about how do you connect biblical truth with issues that raise all kinds of other issues of morality, issues of judgment, issues of community, issues of how do we look at God. So that's been a very interesting and informative thing for us to really look at how do we dissect that good news? What really is it? And then human sexuality and gender, and don't gasp when you see that. People from this side of the world think, what are you teaching at a Bible college? Gender and sexuality. But we look at what are the drivers of HIV. And for us, in our part of the world, it's gender-based violence. And much of it is sanctioned by the culture, and it's even in the church. And we feel like godly relationships between men and women should not be violent, that that's not a part of the gospel. So what is the good news? The good news is, how do we relate? We need to talk about how do we relate as men and women to each other in our marriages, in our homes, in our community. We also think women should be educated, and we think women should have equal opportunities in business, because we have a large portion of our population of single moms trying to support their families. Well, they need opportunities and options for business and engaging in the working world. And those are gender issues that need to be addressed. So that's what we look at there. All of this has brought us to thinking, with HIV, as with anything else, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen in the community. And what we really want to see is transformed communities. We want to see the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, lived out in community. And that's both health and economics and a lot of other things. How do we help the church and our church leaders connect to their communities? So we've morphed our department into community health and development. And so that's the next phase that we're working on now, and developing some courses in that. And because there's many issues, and one of them is disability. It's not in a slide. We are taking a class now with Johnny and friends that's going to help us to work a little bit more. How do we help the church connect in disability? So it's another health issue, but it's one that's a development issue as well. So our teaching behavior change program, this one that we are teaching, has been wildly successful. We've gone down into a trucking community, and we're leading probably 500 to 1,000 kids to make a commitment to follow Jesus every year. That's a lot of kids. So we have these 6 lessons, and we spend 7 weeks with them. The last week is just reviewing their questions. And it's biblically based, and it's talking about Jesus as our guide, and the guidebook is the Bible. But that's it. Then we leave. The teachers have come back to us and complained, saying, you know what? You're engaging with our kids, and they really like you, and they're all excited about what you're telling them, and then you leave. And then they come and ask us those questions, and we don't know how to answer them. And they're saying, you need to come back and do something. And they were right, because if you are leading people to Christ and not discipling them, are those 6 or 7 weeks going to get them through the next 5 years of teenagehood into adulthood? Probably not. And so we're saying, wow, what do we do? This is a little bit of an overwhelming task. That's a lot of kids, and we don't have manpower. We cannot do it. But in 2020, we were deciding that maybe we could, whoops, I skipped. Yeah, in 2020, we were going to start a program and do some training. We had scheduled it for March of 2020. Well, you know what happened in March of 2020. The whole world shut down because of COVID. So all our plans for this discipleship did as well. But in April of this year, we were able to finally roll out that training, and we called together some people from this community, which is a trucking community down in the valley, and we got a much bigger response than we thought just from our contacts. We thought we might get 40 to 50 people to come to be trained. We were hoping for that. We got 100. And one of them was when we were doing a prayer walk before then, we thought, well, we should stop by the police department and just make ourselves known, because they're going to wonder, who are these people walking around stopping at corners and doing something. So we thought we better tell them we're doing a prayer walk. And the chief of police said, hey, that's a great idea. Can I send some of my officers to your training? Like, okay, sure. So she sent 3 of them that were working with youth. And so these are the people that are working with youth on the streets and trying to help them get off the streets. So what a wonderful opportunity that was for us to go ahead and do that, train them. And now they are doing it, in some of them in schools, some of them in churches, and some of them in other venues. So that's just beginning. So we're excited about that. We've talked to you before about our Positive Teens, which has been our heartthrob. These kids that are really struggling to move out of the shadows, as we call it, to enter life in its fullness with all the challenges that they have, mainly the stigma. Well, we had seen some great results from the camps that we did, but then COVID came. So COVID is, now what do? Everything had to shut down. So now that we're climbing out of COVID, we're finding out all the things that happened during COVID, and not all of it was good. We've had a lot of kids that stopped taking their medicines because life was so terrible. They were isolated at home without school support, without the support of their HIV support groups, without the camps, without anything to feed into them. No church support, nothing. And so they were locked down in homes that sometimes were pretty hard and harsh. We found unwanted pregnancies, so we now have a cohort of teen moms whose education has to stop because they have a baby now to take care of. They're not ready to take care of a baby. And for some of them, it was because of a rape. And so how do we deal with them? So we're having to kind of think about these teens again. But we were able to have a camp in April. April was a good month this year. And then we started a teen support group for these teenage moms so that they can have some other people feeding into their lives. They didn't really fit with the older support groups of women that had families, because even those women said, look at you, you're a bad girl, not knowing their story, even though some of them had been taken advantage of. So we thought we need to do something. Okay, then we have, did I get it? Yeah, I did. Okay. So Moffat's students are now taking all these messages out in different places, to children's homes, to Maasai villages where the gospel is not heard very much, to schools, and they're having a great time. So that's really been helpful. When COVID came, we've just kind of talked about that. Our classes were all put online. I think we've told you that before. And we managed to do that. We learned how to do more with social media with the kids to communicate, because we didn't have any other way, but not everybody had a device, but many of them did. We learned how to have international prayer meetings across continents. That was kind of fun. So lots of good things there. And along with that was COVID Equip. Oops, I didn't turn this one. Okay. COVID Equip was a project that Bob got called into from Sim International, and in which they realized a lot of countries, Kenya was not alone, many countries, what do you do when churches can't meet, when you can't do all the things that you're used to doing? Pastors were saying, how can I possibly pastor a church when we can't meet and it's not safe to be together? How do I do visitation? How do we do weddings? How do we do funerals? How do we deal with all the anxiety and the depression that goes with this? So SIM put together a team of people, and we produced some modules that could be viewed and taken out by small teams in smaller groups to train pastors and church leaders. How do you deal with these things? And Bob got to put together, he helped with those other first 4, and then they added a 5th one when vaccines came out, because again, vaccines create a lot of questions. What do we do as church? I mean, you've heard the debates here. How do we think about this? Is this the mark of the beast? Is this going to inject something bad into me? Or is this good? Or how do we look at that holistically? How can we look at that from what does God want us to do? So they created that and talked more about that. Again, in COVID, because we're kind of going through what happened before COVID, and then after. For me, I got locked down. But I had a beautiful garden in my yard, and I could go out in my yard, and I thought, what a wonderful place So decided, wouldn't it be nice if we had that for our students? And I started thinking more. I had time to think because I couldn't do anything else. And so it was wonderful. And then I realized, there's a very trashy looking space behind our old administrative building, just on the other side of my hedge. Let me see if we can do something to make that look like a place we could go and pray. So that's what we did, to have a place where people could just have a personal retreat, find the solace that they needed, finding God. And so that's a place where our students do now come. The principal had no trouble giving me permission. He was really excited about that. So we have, in the center of the garden is the cross. And I think as we are doing these other studies on disability, the cross really is the center of our life as Christians, isn't it? It's what Jesus did on that cross that makes all the difference. And so there's a place where you can go and take your burdens to the cross, where you can put yourself on the cross and live the life with Jesus. Bob is now engaged with an organization called Banda Health. And Banda Health, he could explain it better than I can. Do you want it? Can you take just a couple minutes?
Her worry is that I might take the whole rest of the time to talk about Banda Health. On our display out there, we do have we put something together that explains it a little bit more. I'll just take a couple minutes and share that Banda Health is an innovative program to assist small clinics in slum areas and remote rural areas that are very economically depressed to provide quality health care as a first port of call for people who really can't afford good health care. And when you think about it, if you want to establish a clinic somewhere, you're not going to put it in the most economically depressed area. If you want to make money from healthcare, you come to the U.S. So who puts a health clinic in a slum? These are brothers and sisters in Christ who have had training as a nurse or as a clinical officer, and they feel God is calling them to share His love and compassion to relieve the suffering of the poorest of the poor. And so they establish a clinic among where the poor live. But just because you're trained medically doesn't mean that you're trained to run a business, to operate a business. And so a lot of these clinics really suffer, and some of them have to shut down because they just can't, economically, they cannot survive in that kind of a economically depressed setting. So Banda Health first rolled out software, business software that it's open source, which means that it's not proprietary. You don't have to pay a lot of money in order to get this software. So it helps them with all the business end of things that they're not trained when they go through their medical or nursing training. And now they're rolling out another module that is clinical, and that's where I come in. Banda Health has asked me to be a clinical advisor and to help review some of the clinical information that's coming in so that we can be of clinical support to them. If you think about it, if the only tool in your toolkit is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. I'm sure you've heard that said before. Okay. So these small clinics in slum areas, they've got a limited number of drugs in their dispensary. They've got a limited number of tests they can do in their laboratory. And so if someone comes in with a very common thing, they can diagnose that, they can treat that. But if it's a little bit uncommon, they may not have what's necessary to diagnose it or to treat it. And so what happened, what we were seeing all the times at Kijami Hospital, people would come who are desperately sick, the illness is far advanced, and they've been to this clinic and that clinic and the other clinic and the other clinic, and they just keep getting worse and worse and worse because the real problem has never been diagnosed. And so the vision of Banda Health is, why can't we equip the first port of call of the poorest of the poor to do a better job of diagnosing, and if it's beyond their capacity, to recognize that and then refer them somewhere where they can get diagnosed and they can get help. so that you can intervene sooner rather than when they're at death's door and they come to Kijabi Hospital because they've heard that's where you go to get your miracle. So that's what Bond of Health is about. I'll have to stop there. You can read more about it at our, I don't know, little booklet, whatever, on our display table. But it's a really exciting vision. We've already got 84 or 86 clinics in this network. We hope to be at 100 by the end of the year. And whenever they do their data entry on their laptop computers, this goes into a central database and generates data that I can review then. And that's what I do as a clinical advisor. I review all this data. I look for the red flags. I find out where are the gaps. And then where can we go back to these clinics and help them improve their clinical performance. So that's exciting. Next time that we come here, I'll share maybe some stories where this has really made an impact, really made a difference. But if you want to read some really well done and exciting stories, you can do that online. And it's in that booklet there, but bondahealth.org, and you can read some incredible stories there already.
It is exciting. And probably we'll tell you more about that the next time, because Bob's going to probably get more and more involved in that and providing the clinical advisory capacity to that. But I want to tell you about something that gets us really excited. Now we're going to move past COVID. We're getting out into what's next. So we have a few new programs that have come up to reach youth. We are working together with a very young, energetic former student and youth pastor, now youth pastor and working with us full-time at Moffitt, who has been working with other Moffitt students saying, how can we reach older youth? We've been working with the adolescents, 12 to 15-year-olds, but the older ones need a lot of help too. So they called together a group of Moffitt students. They said, let's start a program. We're going to call it Hekima. So, whoops, I didn't advance this, did I? Okay, we'll just continue talking. I was going to tell you about the word that's up there, Hekima. And Hekima means wisdom. And in Kiswahili, it's spelled Hekima. But the students said, we want to put the big letter C in the middle of that, which is Christ. So we want to talk about the wisdom of Christ. So they sent out messages to all of the churches in the area and schools and wherever, and said, we're going to meet on Sunday afternoon, once a month. We're going to start in February 2022. And it was kind of in preparation for Valentine's Day, which, you know, Valentine's Day, people have, the young people in Kenya have kind of said, oh yeah, a day of love and all kinds of things. And so sometimes they get a little carried away. So okay, we're going to talk about something that the teens really like. Let's talk about dating and friendships and that kind of relationship. And they had never heard that in a church before, because church youth groups don't talk about things like that. And so they came, many of them. We were expecting we were hoping for like 60, 70. We got 150 the first time. And this is within walking distance. We live out there on the side of an escarpment. We call it, you would call it what? A steep hill. And it's in a forest. So it's like, I didn't know there were that many teens. The next time, they told their friends about it, and they brought 200. And the third time, the third month, they brought 300. So he's like, whoa, this is growing. And it was very engaging, because we would tell them, we'd give a topic, and then the students would either do a skit, or we would have a short video clip that was contextualized from their context, from about, it should go back one. Oops, I can't do that here. Can you go back one? There we go. That's the one. Thank you. Yeah, so where was I? We're talking about the numbers of kids, and what we do is they get a story or something, and then we break them into small groups, and our Moffitt Bible College students have to lead the groups, which trains them, and they have come up with the questions to help these teens think through those issues that they face every day, practical issues of teens. And so then they come back together and they share what they've learned. And it's very engaging, and the students, the high school students have found it very helpful. And usually we have one or two that say, I want to follow Jesus. And some of the topics were like, we weren't even doing an evangelistic thing here. It wasn't evangelistic at all. We were trying to help them with practical daily discipleship kinds of things that are issues that they're not talked about. But they found the way it was talked about was like, wow, I see now the Bible has relevance to me. And I do want to follow it. I see it in a different way. The senior church leadership heard about this. So they said, we got to come and check this thing out. And so they sent some representatives who then called the people from their radio stations, Biblia Husema and Truth FM, which are two leading Christian broadcasting networks that broadcast all over Kenya and even outside. And so they came and they said, hey, this is really good. We're looking for programming for youth. Can you make this for radio? And we're like, wow. You know, the beauty of this was the discussion groups. How do you do that on radio? And so we sat as a team and talked about it, but my younger colleague was not to be daunted. He says, yes, I think we can do this. So he said, okay, go for it. And so he and his team talked about how to do that so we could still have an interaction, so there'd be call-ins and people to answer questions, and so there was still that dynamic of youth to youth. And so we said, okay, we'll do it, because we had to also put out a financial commitment. The radio station said, we'll cover 90%, you have to cover 10%. So we said, okay, let's do it for 3 months. We both agreed, let's do a 3-month pilot, just to see, can we even do this? This was every week for a half an hour in Swahili and half an hour in English, 2 different stations. And they have their own metrics by which they look at what is their listenership. And so after 3 months, they said, yeah, I think it's good. Let's continue. We said, well, how many people are listening? And they said, well, by our metrics, it looks like you've been receiving 15,000 listeners every week. 15,000. Wow. We had not even thought, I didn't even know people listen to radio anymore. We were kind of thinking, well, is this even a valid venue for us? But apparently they do. And when we looked at their map of where the heaviest listening areas are, they're all in the northern part of Kenya, northern and northwestern and northeastern Kenya, which is primarily unreached people groups, where there are few churches and few programs going for youth. It's like, whoa, okay. So now they're asking us, can you do it for 1 hour each? Because half an hour isn't enough. That's the complaint. It's not long enough. We said, We took a deep swallow and said, well, how about if we just agree to continue it till the end of the year and then evaluate in December? So that's what we've done at a half an hour. So we'll see what happens next year. So we have to also raise funds, because this was an unbudgeted item, but what an opportunity that God just gave us out of the blue. We didn't ask for it. We didn't look for it. But God just said, here, do it. So we have this Today for Tomorrow discipleship program going down in the valley, and we're hoping that's going to grow. We need to do more with that. We need to train more volunteers, because we don't have enough to cover all the schools we're in. And we want to keep encouraging teens. Okay, the next slide. Our future plans. Developing new courses is part of them. That's our task. We're going to introduce a new course on community health and development for church leaders. How do they think about things like disability? How do they think about things like substance abuse, mental illness, addictions, pandemics, cancer, long-term chronic illness? How do we as church leaders engage with that? And disability and church engagement. We're looking at, okay, how do we help our people see, how do we deal with suffering? How do we deal with disability? How do we deal with hardships? How do we incorporate people that are basically hidden in our culture? Because there's many cultural things that make people fear even leaving their home. If they have somebody disabled at home, that person is kind of locked away at home because it's a shame for them to be out and seen, because it might have been a curse, or they're blamed for some sin, or, you know, all those things that we find in Scripture that Jesus himself had to address. So we want to address those. And so we want to continue supporting these community programs. And then I'm adding on one for the Hope for Life as a member care and prayer support for our international program through SIM, in which we have been working for years. It's called Hope for AIDS before we've morphed into Hope for Life. So how do I help engage with that? And then the last slide is that we don't do all of this by ourselves. We do it as a team. We work as a team there, but our team is you. We can't do it without people behind us on this side of the ocean. We need prayer, because we're asked to do a lot of things that we don't necessarily feel comfortable with, that we maybe don't feel like we're totally ready, but God has given us that opportunity. He says, are you going to take it or not? Are you going to walk in obedience or not? So we need your prayers for that, and we need your support and your encouragement, because this work is not just our work, it's your work, the people that support us. We are the workers. We get to be on the front line. That's our privilege, but we are part of a bigger group of people, and you are part of that group. So thank you for being a part of us for so many years, and we appreciate all that you've done and for allowing us to come and talk, and the support that Nahunta Friends has offered. Thank you very much, and we want you to know what you're doing. And I think if we have any time left, maybe we can field some questions. We wanted to just give you something to ask questions from.
Yeah, so we've got, we usually finish at about 10:45, so we got about 5 minutes for questions or comments or whatever. I might mention, if you've been reading our newsletters and all of that, okay, we don't talk very much about the financial side of things. People are so inundated with money, you know, support what we're doing, support, you know, and honestly, financial resources are needed to make things happen. We've never wanted to be about money. We've always believed if people pray for us, God will provide the resources that are necessary for us to be faithful to the call that He's given to us. And so we err on the side of just not talking about financial stuff. But we do need support. There's a SIM project that supports the ministry activities of our department at Moffat Bible College. That's where Martin Salary, our Kenyan colleague that Hope has been talking about, comes from that project. If that project weren't there, Martin couldn't be there.
And we're now wanting to add, well, we have added another Moffat alumnus to help us with this discipleship program, because it's too big, we don't have enough people, so that all has to come out of that project.
So the cost of Hekima, the cost of supporting the Rehema student group, if we go from 30 minutes to 60-minute radio programming, it will double the cost of that, which hasn't even been budgeted for in the past. And so all of these are realities. We're going to have to mention that from time to time in our newsletters. So when you see it, don't be offended by that. Just realize it's a practical reality we need to mention. Okay? That it doesn't change our heart, our passion for the ministry that God has given to us. So there's a lot going on. God has brought us into a time of transition where we are actually going to be physically located more in the United States. Based out, we have a house in Indianapolis, and we're going to be living there more. We'll be going once a year to Kenya, spending about 4 months there. So about 4 months in Kenya and then 8 months in the U.S. working remotely. But the reason for that is that we also have family. My father is 94 years old. I have an 87-year-old stepmother who just had a hip replacement surgery. We've got 8 grandchildren, and they need to know who their grandparents are other than just faces on a refrigerator magnet. And so God is saying, I'm not releasing you from what you've been doing, but you need to be more present for family in the U.S. We want to be faithful to that as well. Our children need to know that they are part of a 3-generation family, 4-generation, including great-grandpa, that honors Christ, that follows Him, that lives according to the wisdom of the Scriptures. They need to know that's their family heritage. And to whether they choose that or not, that's up to the Lord and to their godly parents. We're blessed, all 4 of our children know and love the Lord. But my parents, they're needing more help at home now. So we want to be faithful to that as well.
So what are we going to be doing those 8 months?
So I'm going to be doing Bond to Health. You're going to be doing the Hope for Life Network. We're going to be still doing remote teaching, working on developing new courses at Moffitt, and whatever else the Lord gives us to do. We're still full-time serving as missionaries with SIM, even if our geographic location is going to be more consistently in the U.S. than in Kenya. We'll still be in Kenya. What that means is we're going to be more available to come and talk to wonderful folks like you, and not just limit it to just maybe 1 month out of the year that we can come. Questions or comments or anything from what Hope was sharing?
So SIM is your missionary-based company that
Yes.
you...
Yes.
SIM is our sending agency. That's right.
SIM is an interdenominational, multinational mission. And so it's not representing just one denomination. Our team is made of people from many different churches, even many different countries. It's not just American-based. Our colleagues come from literally all around the world, from South America, from Asia, from, many places. So, that's our sending agency.
It actually has a motto, from everywhere to everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, we've had Christian missionaries from India coming and serving in Kenya. We have Ethiopians who are serving in Kenya.
We have a Bolivian serving in Kenya with us on our team.
So from everywhere to everywhere. So it's not a U.S. Centric sending organization. And I tell you what, when we have our spiritual life conferences, and it's a multicultural time of just worship and sharing and growing in the Lord. It's wonderful. I'm glad that everybody's not like us.
And we all bring something different to the table. That's what we've learned. Some of our South American brothers and sisters are especially good. Somehow they can culturally connect with the Muslim community in Northern Africa. I don't understand that connection. Our Ethiopian brothers, when they were working, brothers and sisters working in South Sudan, they were very good at evangelism, and they could go into communities and they could do things that no Western missionary could. They were hopeless on the logistics. So we needed the Western point for logistics. So it's like you pull out the best of each team. So we all have different skills and ways of working together that it really exemplifies the body of Christ, the global body of Christ, in a beautiful way.